The presenter today, Charlotte Smith.
Good morning. Today, still the greenest government? It gives the go-ahead for some farmers to use controversial banned pesticides, but says it now supports the EU ban it once argued against. Confused? The Prime Minister says it's all about the science.
We have to just be informed by the science, and if the scientists start telling us that these things are safer than they thought, then perhaps we can licence some trials and the rest of it.
Now, there's some confusion this morning about what the government's decision to allow limited use of neonicotinoids will mean for farmers. Neonics are pesticides used to coat seeds, so the resulting plants kill the bugs trying to eat them, in this case oilseed rape and cabbage stem flea beetles. Now, these pesticides have been banned by the EU for 2 years, while there's further investigation into concerns that they're linked to declines in the number of bees. Farmers across Europe have complained that that's meant lower yields. And under the rules, individual countries are allowed to temporarily reverse the ban if circumstances call for it. Denmark, Finland, Estonia, Bulgaria and Romania have already done that. Well, the National Farmers Union has been asking ministers for permission in the UK for some time, and now neonics will be allowed on 5% of the croppable area of oilseed rape. That's about 75,000 acres. But which 75,000 acres? The Prime Minister, David Cameron, speaking at the Royal Welsh Show, said the decision to allow neonics hadn't been taken lightly.
We should follow the science. The EU put in place the ban on the neonics, and I think that's a decision that was taken. We have to just be informed by the science, and if the scientists start telling us that these things are safer than they thought, then perhaps we can licence some trials and the rest of it. But be guided by the science, think very carefully about these things. And also, in my view, as someone with a large rural constituency, listen to the local experts, listen to the beekeepers, listen to what they've got to say.
The Prime Minister, David Cameron. This is welcome news for many farmers, but just who will get the treated seeds still isn't entirely clear. The NFU President, Meurig Raymond, also speaking from the Royal Welsh, told Emma Campbell the NFU will be working together with the seed companies and government agencies.
There is no doubt a lot of farmers will already pre-ordered their seed, but then there would be other farmers in part of the country who lost crop last year and are very sceptical and are very concerned about growing the crop this year. It's quite expensive to grow, and again, to have a crop failure, and a lot of people had intended to withdraw from growing the crop. With this opportunity, they may well reconsider and come back and hopefully purchase a seed, because it's so important to the UK economy, 1.8 million acres of a valuable crop.
There are going to be a lot of farmers hoping they can be in that 5% though. Who gets to choose?
I guess at the end of this consultation there will be geographical boundaries. We know the major damage to the crop last year was Bedfordshire, Hertfordshire, Cambridgeshire, Suffolk, Norfolk. So I'm guessing at the moment that will be the area that will be concentrated for the 5% of seed that will become available.
Meurig Raymond there. Well, environmental groups have condemned the decision, saying there's clear evidence that neonics do harm bees. Paul Hetherington is from BugLife.
We are frankly appalled that this is happening, that the government are caving in to more or less the first piece of pressure they're put under. The ban hasn't even been in place 2 years. The neonics have a 2-year half-life in the soil. How are we ever going to get proper comparative data if they keep moving the goalposts and keep allowing this to happen again? The first lot of data we've had of harvest in was from last year's rapeseed, and it actually showed a 26% increase in yield. But of course, some of that was planted before the ban came into effect. This year would be the first year to get a real comparison as to what the effect is. And now all of a sudden they're going to allow some of it to be treated, and the whole picture gets blurred.
Other countries, though, have done exactly the same. Wouldn't it be unfair not to do it for British farmers too?
But we have a government who, when they first came into office, said they wanted to be the greenest government ever, and yet all the time they are rolling back the standards. They're not doing what's good for nature. There are so many studies, and there are more coming in all the time, that show that neonics are really bad for our pollinators. We know that our pollinators are worth over £500 million every year to the UK farming industry. Now, you're going to have to lose an awful lot of your crops before that is compensated for, and that That is the gamble that the government are taking by putting this through. The vast majority of studies, and not all of them have been in the field because field studies are very, very expensive to run, but they are showing that neonicotinoids have various very bad and negative effects on pollinators, and particularly our wild pollinators. They're showing reduced reproduction, they're showing reduced size of nests, they're showing reduced nesting within solitary bees. All of these things are pointing to big problems, and of course we already know that our pollinators are in decline.
Paul Hetherington there from Bug Life. Well, many farmers are currently harvesting oilseed rape and will be planting the next crop in the next few weeks. So where does this leave them? John Collin farms near Lowestoft in Suffolk and has lost whole fields of rape to flea beetle.
The crop that we have left that we're combining is fine because the ones that weren't fine were pulled up and re-drilled with something else.
So those that were affected were so badly affected that you junked them and started again?
That's correct, yes.
Now, it isn't yet clear which 5% will get the treated seeds, the neonicotinoid seeds. Will you wait now before you replant to see if you can get hold of some?
We won't wait, no, but we will make every effort we can to try and secure what little seed is available for our own use, along with every other farmer in the east of England, certainly.
Why? If actually you didn't lose that much over the year, is it worth it?
Yes. We are already seeing some stubble turnips, which is a winter fodder crop for sheep and cattle, have already been drilled for this season, and they are already being massacred by flea beetle. It is a brassica crop and is affected in the same way as oilseed rape is. Because the flea beetle returned to the soil and over year effectively, we are already seeing very, very high numbers this year. And certainly one of my neighbours is already considering pulling up some stubble turnips because they are so badly affected.
Just give us some idea of your timescale now, John. When do you need to get those seeds, treated or untreated, in the ground?
We are in the oilseed rape harvest now, and we will be drilling next year's crop certainly within 14, 15 days, something like that sort of timescale.
So with an announcement this week, is there time for it to actually be meaningful?
Yes, because the seed that we're currently harvesting will be treated with whatever seed dressing we can get hold of to plant for next year. So the seeds that we've ordered and we'll drill next year are still being combined. However, 5% represents such a small area that there will be a seed grab, for want of a better term, for that 5%.
Farmer John Collin in Lowestoft there. Well, when the EU introduced the ban on neonics in 2013, the British government argued against it. But the farming minister, George Eustace, told me he supports the ban on neonicotinoids, and this decision is not a partial lifting of it, just emergency use for a specific area.
Earlier in the summer, the NFU put in an application for a much wider area, covering 79% of the crop. The expert committee recommended that we reject that, so we did reject it. But what the expert committee have said on this one is that it should be predominantly Suffolk, because that is where we know the problem is worse. But if a special case could be made for not doing parts of Suffolk, but for doing other bits around the edge of Suffolk, well, that could be looked at. But, the way that this process will work is there's an absolute hard cap of 5% of the crop area, which is equivalent to Suffolk. There could be some flexibility on the fringes, but broadly speaking, we are talking about farmers in Suffolk who've had a particular problem last year.
We heard earlier from the Prime Minister, who said that in making this decision you'd followed the science. But there is some criticism from environmental groups who say that the EU ban was to allow more research. And now that you've done this, we won't in the UK be able to compare before and after the ban because you've muddied the waters.
Well, that's not true. What you have to understand is that the EU ban, which, as I said, is still in place, which we support, and we wouldn't actually support a change unless the evidence pointed to that. The EU ban itself made provision for emergency authorisations. You have to understand that emergency authorisations are an integral part of a precautionary approach. If you're going to have a precautionary ban, you have to allow certain emergency authorisations and to really check, do we need to use these particular chemicals? And if so, where do we use them? And how do we make sure their use is absolutely limited to the smallest possible area? That's what we've done on this. So we have followed the science.
You say that you support this EU ban, but I seem to remember the then Environment Secretary Owen Paterson arguing hammer and tong against it.
Well, at the time, the UK had a piece of research that highlighted that most of the evidence was laboratory evidence, and it's still the case that we've got a lack of field-scale evidence, and that's one of the things that we need more of, and it's one of the gaps. But we have, I think, since then, there's been a number of different reports, some of them giving different conflicting signals. A recent report, for instance, from Sweden suggested that probably there wasn't any harm to honeybees, but there might be some to bumblebees. So there's a lot of ambiguity about the evidence. And what we're saying is we recognise that more research is needed, and we've got a genuinely open mind now. 2 years ago, yes, the UK took a position that it opposed the ban. That was then, this is now. And we approach this review with a genuinely open mind.
So you've changed your mind?
I was saying that we're approaching this with a genuinely open mind. And at the time, we were basing the position that we took 2 years ago specifically on the evidence that we had at that time. There's been other evidence since. It's quite an ambiguous picture. There's mixed evidence. And so I do think it's important to keep an open mind. I'm not at all one for being wedded to a position and never changing it irrespective of the evidence.
The Farming Minister, George Eustace. That's it from us. I'm Charlotte Smith. The producer here in Bristol is Sally Challoner.